Trip on sale now at WNST.net. But I've been monitoring all things Capitals. We got a big night coming up with Barry Trotz in March, as well as the Wizards, who are winning, and the surging Terps. Beginning of the week, it was tough to figure out who the most surging team was, but the Terps have been the surprise of the Big Ten. This guy sees as much Big Ten basketball and as much basketball around the country. He was at the big Tennessee-Kentucky game the other night for Westwood One. He is a broadcaster for Big Ten Network, and he's a defending champion here at WNST. We welcome John Crispin back onto the program to talk a little Big Ten action. But, man, I thought you would think I'd be leaving you alone by now because the Terps would be somewhere in the middle or the bottom of the Big Ten. This has been a real shock to everyone here who follows the Terps, but it's been a wonderful little surprise this year.
Absolutely, and I've been shocked myself. When I looked at this team and Mark Turgeon came into media day and said, look, I really like my team. You guys are going to really like this team. There was a part of me that looked at it was kind of like, media day, blind optimism. You really don't know because they're freshmen, and can Melo Trimble really be the leader that they need him to be? Well, the answer to all of that is yes, they are that good. The freshmen are that good. Melo Trimble is that good of a leader. And when you have a guy like Melo do what he does, make big shots, get to the foul line when you need to get to the foul line, it gives a lot of confidence to the young guys. So the young guys play and keep games close, knowing that they've got a star who can get an easy bucket down the stretch.
Well, and having that star player, he was there all of last year too, right? But wasn't fully healthy. And as I've said, for a team to have one guy that they know, look, last 3 minutes of the game, we're going to be in some tight games. We're going to play on the road in this conference. We need somebody to hit those shots. Last year, there were 6 guys on the team that wanted the ball.
Yeah, that was an issue. Chemistry, you cannot say enough about how important chemistry is with the team. We talk a lot of culture these days, but chemistry is really at the forefront. It's great that you have talent. And I think that's the criticism of teams that go with the one and done. And going back to having that Kentucky-Tennessee game, you could see there's a lack of chemistry with young guys that are all trying to get theirs. They're really not working together. That's not a cohesive bunch. And what you see with this young team compared to last year is that this group actually buys into togetherness. They buy into the fact that they need to be a good defensive team as a team, not as individuals. And then they need to move the ball really well and share the basketball. And whoever's night it's going to be, that's who it's going to be. But for the most part, Melo is going to be your guy. There's confidence in that. And you also understand your role, which gives you even more confidence, knowing where you fit in. That team last year, they all want to be the star, and understandably so. I mean, you got Jake Layman, you got Diamond Stone, Robert Carter Jr., and Rashid Suleiman. These are all high-level guys. It's really difficult, and they don't have a ton of time playing together. It's really difficult to find chemistry with that group, and I think that's why Mark Turgeon likes this squad so much.
John, when you're considering the rest of the Big Ten and the pressures on all of these coaches, I'm close with John Harbaugh, obviously here in Baltimore, his brother-in-law coaching out in Indiana, and his support, and I was down there that night. I saw John that day who had his big press conference with Steve Bisciotti.
Yep.
That's sort of coaches still get a little worked up about that stuff in front of the media, in front of the fans, where they're being evaluated, and coaches are being evaluated every minute of every day. Man, I saw Crean in there at that point, and boy, they had just a hell of a week, and things have gotten a little better down the stretch here, but that kind of, you need to be a top 5, top 10 team and have that expectation. Maryland had that last year. Indiana's had that. Izzo's had that many times, but there seems to be something here that's very comfortable for Mark Turgeon to say, I'm a better coach than maybe you gave me credit, and we're here for the long term, and I can deal with what I had last year and have that sort of tumult going on in April and May and June, not knowing whether these kids are going to go into the draft, whether they're going to come back, play basketball, and I got to go recruit. To have 3 freshmen come in, this has really been amazing because they don't look like they're going to hurt the team at any point. It looks like Herter, Jackson, and Cowan are going to be that kind of player in March when you need them to be that player.
Yeah, so far so good. And I think you've got to credit Mark Turgeon not just for being a great coach or a better coach than anyone gave him credit for, but ultimately coaching to his personality, coaching to his style. And I think last year he got away from that because he had some high-level transfers. And it's hard to say no to some high-level guys like that who you feel like you could win immediately with, who you look at and go, you know what, I pair this guy with Melo Trimble. Wow, we're going to be pretty good. Well, it sounds good, and it looks good on paper, But when you're trying to put together a game plan and you're trying to coach and kind of instill a system, and Mark Turgeon is a system guy. He's more of a win with less, and eventually I'll get more type of guy, similar to a Wisconsin and Bo Ryan. He's not a blue-chip type of coach, and that's a compliment. I think it's easy to coach blue chippers. Ultimately, you're managing the team like an NBA GM or president of operations. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you do with blue chippers. But Mark Turgeon is more of a blue-collar, let's win with less talent. And all of a sudden, you got freshmen who are highly talented, but will buy in and listen and be a part of a team. It really suits Mark Turgeon's style and his personality. And I think that's why you're seeing success.
Where are they going to get tripped up here in the Big Ten? I mean, you look down, you see, well, Minnesota this week, they're going out to Columbus. I know you were in Columbus on Wednesday night as well. What are they going to see from these two opponents? And certainly, they got tripped up last year out in Minnesota, but they really took care of business against Ohio State.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I don't really see a hiccup in their schedule. They really are set up nicely because they only have to play Purdue, Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan State, and I believe Minnesota once. So if those are the teams you only have to, and Northwestern as well. Northwestern's a very good basketball team. So if you only have to play those teams once, it's a little bit easier to prepare for them. You play with a certain sense of urgency. When you play them twice, you just don't go in with the same level of urgency, and that's something that you really need, and teams tend to lack at times. I think that's how the Terps got knocked out at Minnesota last year. They just didn't play with a sense of urgency, and Minnesota, even though they were depleted, you make enough shots, you stay in the game and give yourself a chance. So this team seems to play with consistency and effort, and that's the thing. When you have a young team, consistency of effort is probably the most important thing, and so far so good, and the schedule just happens to set up pretty nicely for it.
Hey, even the good teams lose. Look at where you were on Tuesday night, and I know you were there in the gym watching that thing unfold. But it was upset city, baby, right? I mean, it was a hell of a night. And then you look up and you say, well, the Terps just keep winning here. You know, every dog has its day, right? I mean, every couple years Maryland would beat Duke.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you'll be defined not by your record, but ultimately how you handle and how you bounce back from a midseason lull. It's inevitable. I mean, you're going to lose a game. You're not going to play well in a certain game. You're going to lose a game that you probably should have won. Say you go to Ohio State, it's a very good basketball team, but they have not been playing to their potential. You lose that game, how do you respond? And that's the thing. You'll be defined by how do you respond to that adversity, how you respond to that lull, more so than what your final record is. So I think with a young team, you got to rely heavily upon a guy like Melo Trimble, who will give you that solid effort and seems to be consistent and giving his young guys confidence. So I think it's ultimately how you handle that little lull. Right now, Minnesota's lost 4 in a row. So how they handle their lull is going to be what defines them.
He is John Crispin, covering all things Big Ten at the Big Ten Network. You can follow his journey at BTN John Crispin. That's JONCRISPIN. And we got, Maryland keeps winning. They're going to send the A-team out here. You're going to be down at College Park calling some games here. But one thing for sure, and I know you know this at the Big Ten Network, I attended a couple of ACC tournaments over the course of, my life. I got down to Carolina once, and it was at the Capitol Center back in the late 80s with Jimmy Valvano and J.R. Reed, Dean Smith, and all that good stuff. But this Big Ten tournament's coming to D.C. Maryland's not only going to be hosting this thing, but and it's going to be a big hootenanny in the nation's capital, but I think for local people to experience it a little bit, Maryland has a real chance to be, a favorite, a 1 seed, and play deep into the weekend as well. That's kind of a fun thing going on here this year that I think people should take advantage of.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's the first time that Maryland's really going to feel a part of the Big Ten. And I know a lot of people have said, it just doesn't feel right. Well, I think having the Big Ten tournament there in D.C. and showcasing not only Maryland to its local crowd, but the Big Ten to the D.C. crowd, I think it's important. I think it's really important that we're doing this. And, next year it's going to be at Madison Square Garden. So, you're getting the Rutgers crowd involved. So you're getting the New Yorkers a chance to really experience Big Ten basketball. And I think it is special, especially with Maryland playing the way they're playing. You have a very good Maryland team, and they get to be showcased. I think the one thing is it will put a little bit of pressure on the Terps to perform in a tournament setting that is really difficult, especially in a conference where anyone can beat anyone. It's going to be one heck of a tournament this year.
What do you think of the perceptions of the Big Ten, where, Maryland, Purdue, Wisconsin banging around, getting bottom 25 respect, but nothing serious? I mean, how many games is Maryland going to have to win? What's it going to be, 22-2, 25? At what point? And then they'll say, well, the only team you beat was Purdue, is what they're going to say, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because they've had a lot of close games, and I think that's what kept me from buying into them right away. They had a great record to start the season, but there were a lot of really close games, and I said, you know what, if they can't put teams away, I think it could be an issue. And so I really wasn't buying them yet. Well, now I've realized that they're one of the most comfortable teams in the country when it comes to close games, and that right there is a skill. That's an art. To have a young team who has no problems playing and winning close games, there's really something that you have to look at with this team and say, wow, they are a legitimate contender, and we do have to start taking them seriously. And I think they're probably where they should be, around that, I'd say that 15 to 20 range is probably where they would be topped out. I think, if anything, it keeps pressure off this young team. Keep them hungry. Give them something to prove. That's when teams that are young are at their best. So don't give them that top 10 ranking. That's when the wheels start to come off.
Minnesota on Saturday at 2 o'clock. That game is on the Big Ten Network. And then to the worldwide leader on Tuesday night at Ohio State in Columbus. And John Crispin's a traveling man out there. You're doing Westwood radio, correct? I mean, that's how you were in an SEC game, right?
Yeah, I had the SEC game. It's interesting. I know these 14 teams in the Big Ten pretty darn well because it's all I see. So I had to do quite a bit more prep work for the Tennessee-Kentucky game. Obviously not as much for Kentucky because you see them enough on TV, but Tennessee really shocked us. I mean, a small team, 6'5". I mean, really, they play their post players at 6'5". And a small team, for them to do what they did, beating Kentucky, defending the way they did, you got to credit Rick Barnes. And it shows that the parity in college basketball, I'd say mainly on the men's side, is really what makes this so interesting. It's what makes the NCAA tournament so interesting. So it's really going to be something to follow between the Big Ten tournament, these other conference tournaments, and then the NCAA tournament, where you're going to have 15 seeds really scared with their matchups because there's mid-majors, and then there's also some high-major schools that are going to get some low seeds. Look at the Big Ten. If you're the 6th or 7th team out of the Big Ten, you're going to get a 12 seed. I'm sorry. If I'm a high seed, I don't want to play a Big Ten team that's a 12 seed. I mean, these are guys that are tested, so it's really going to lead to an interesting postseason.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you say a veteran guy like you gets on a plane and you fly into a place thinking the outcome's going to be one thing, right? You had no thought that it wasn't if Kentucky, it was how many they were going to win by, right, when you got on the plane.
Exactly. I mean, and I felt terribly saying that. But when you look at the matchup, when you look at the personnel, and you look at how Kentucky scores, I mean, shoot, their average possession is 14 and a half seconds. That's insane. 14 and a half seconds per possession. So you look at the team and you say, well, they scored 93 points a game. I don't think it's going to be a contest. Well, parity wins out. Everybody else is on scholarship, and they all practice too. So it's no surprise that these big-time teams get bounced, especially when you got young teams.
He is John Crispin at the Big Ten Network. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at BTN John Crispin. Always great to visit with you, my man. Hope you get it east here. And, hey, either way, I'll meet you in D.C. first week of March. That'll be fun, right?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
Hey, man, great having you on. John Crispin joining us here from the Big Ten Network. Terps after it Saturday at 2 against Minnesota, then on to Ohio State. Next home game is next Saturday against Purdue. That is a noon game as well. We're going to be at Houston all next week, Super Bowl 51, full coverage. We're going to be streaming live on Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNST TV channel. And, of course, you'll hear it all on WNST AM 1570 and in our Buy a Toyota Audio Vault. 24 hours a day, it's there for whenever you want to listen to what you want to listen to. Check it out at WNST.net and download that TuneIn Radio app. Reminder, morning newspaper, 7 a.m. and it's your email inbox each and every morning. That's box scores, standings, headlines. People seem to dig it. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's free to get our morning newspaper, and it's $10 a month to be a member of Planet Fitness. There's one right down the street from me. I'm sure of it. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home on the SSV on WNST. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.